Hey team, welcome to episode 106 of Transition Talk, where we talk about dental transitions and how to navigate the sometimes messy path to practice ownership. If you've already listened to episode 24, you may have a good idea about how to announce your transition to your team. Whether you're the one telling the team or if you're a buyer coming into the practice with an established team, this episode will still be helpful for you. That episode is still relevant, of course, and actually offers a ton of information. In this episode, we want to do a little bit of an update and actually focus a little bit more on the soft skills, the early part of telling the team, because it's really important and a point that our team spends an inordinate amount of time talking about and that I know our clients spend a lot of time worrying about. So hopefully by the time you finish this episode, you feel a little bit more confident about this big step and big communication. But before we get going, Mr. Loretto.
Hey, Christy.
Hello.
I was listening this morning of the early episode we did. The episode was 24, is back in 2019. I kind of got a little cringe listening to myself. If you've never recorded yourself like this and you go back and listen, it's like we don't like to listen to each other. A couple of funny things. 10. I say the word 10. I don't know why I'm so country. I mean, I'm a Texas boy, but I sound a little country, so it's just had a little. And going back to those episodes, Christy, we are giving so much information. It's like we are trying to overwhelm the listener. I had to stop.
It's like we thought we were only going to record 50 episodes.
I think that's what it was. I think we were like, let's just try this out. Let's give everything we have in our brain and brain dump. And so is coming into this episode, I think the older Charles episode, 106 versus 24 is really to slow down and focus on just small little sound bites of what we think that can help a certain individual. To me, this is ideal for our sellers because it's so much from an important standpoint to have that leadership role of delivering. How do we transition that practice and communication team? So I just had to get that out there to set us up. But let's start with you first and what's going on with the summer. We're heading into summer. So what are the girls doing? What's Chris doing? What's happening on the home front?
Yeah, we're going to call this Hell Week.
Yes.
For moms. This week in particular, you're going to listen to this at the end of May, and I'm going to be well past this, but this is award ceremony, field day. It's Spirit Week. We're prepping for next week. We're setting for finals. We're having end of year parties. Oh, by the way, can you bring a beanbag to the party, which is something I got this morning. I'm not really sure how to bring a beanbag to a party, but I'm going to figure that out by tomorrow. And so, yeah, we're just prepping for summer. I think, I'm in full swing of, actually, if Lila's 13 now, I was thinking back to 2019 and how young they were. Now she's 13, so she's kind of aged out of camps. So now I'm figuring out, what do I do with you while I work? So we're actually going to get her a little part-time job at a gymnastics studio near our house where she's going to help out with some camps. And then Bren's got all the soccer, art, horse, farm, Bible study, all the things.
The parent stress during the summer, I know it sounds really bad, but you love your children and you can't wait to spend the time with them. But it's like day 2 and you're like, when is summer over?
and all the camps are like, we offer a full day camp. It is 9 to 2:30.
Right.
I'm like, oh, cool. I'm not sure if that's full time.
Yeah, for only $275 for this, 1 week part time. Yeah, so stressful. So I know school's out, at least colleges are, because we've been traveling here lately, and the airports are packed.
They are.
Everyone is, doing kind of their summer thing. So yeah, it's a totally different space that I'm in at this point where all the empty nesters can relate to this. And for my seller doctors is kids are maybe back from college, they get out early and now they're there. Now you're kind of stressing about what we're doing for them, over the summer. You got to plan your trips and what are we doing, Dad? And so we were in that and doing a big family trip coming up this weekend. So it'll be fun.
It will be fun. Over Christmas, I was like, why did you plan so much? Why are you so stressed? Enjoy this. And so I'm going to go into summer just being like, it's fine.
Yeah.
We're all going to live. I mean, I stayed at my grandma's every day. I was probably bored out of my mind, and I'm fine. I'm a well-adjusted adult.
I know.
So they're going
you don't
to be
have
fine.
to prepare everything every day. I know.
And it's okay if they eat crap all day. It's
Yeah,
fine.
yeah.
They're going to grow. It's fine. So this is an episode that I was excited to redo in a way because I feel like I'm just spending a lot of time talking about this in my current clients, but in the kind of client sphere overall. And I think it's one of the things I enjoy the most. And maybe it's because the totally opposite of the numbers and the hard analysis and the valuation work that we do. But it's the softer piece of it just is a pure reminder that this process is made up of humans and humans react differently and they all worry about very similar things in this transition. And so kind of focusing on those soft skills skills and kind of that telling your staff and telling your patients is what a lot of people really stress over and have a lot of anxiety over. So I'm hopeful this episode can kind of break that down a little more.
Yeah, people just think that, okay, I'm going to hire an accountant to walk me through a transition or evaluation or represent me as a buyer or seller. Numbers are certainly important, but I mean, 90% of what we do is communication with the people and coordinating what to do and what not to do. And so that's obviously what this episode's about. Really, it's about communication to all the parties and how to effectively do that. So this is more on our sellers and kind of guide them how to lead this process.
Yeah. And if you're a buyer listening, you're going to get tons of stuff here too, because you're going to be able to hear what's happening on the other side and what hopefully has happened already by the time you kind of enter the picture. Okay. So the first thing we always get asked, sometimes it's right after they sign an engagement letter with us to like even figure out what the price of their practice is. They say, when do I tell my team? Should I tell them now? Should I tell them later? When do I tell them? So your perspective, I know this is going to vary by client, but when is a good time to tell your team about a transition?
Okay, so and back up just 2 seconds and I'll answer that, is sellers. And then again, for my buyers, I need for you to be mentally prepared for this process. This is definitely a long game for you. You've been in this for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, whatever the number is. So you're mentally ready for the transition. Mentally ready is mentally ready to give up control, mentally ready to be able to allow these patients to see a younger, maybe in your mind, less skilled person, mentally being able to have that young person now come in and to tell your team of 20 plus years of what to do. And that's a very hard conversation that you got to have mentally in your head and with your accountant, with your financial advisor. You've got to be completely, from a mental standpoint, financially, you got to be ready. Health has got to be where, I definitely want to do this either now or transition over a short period of time. You've got to really be mentally thinking about if it's going to be a transition where you're completely out, where you're working maybe 1 day a week, then you have to be prepared. And then there's also that practice that you're maybe mentally prepared, but would like to stay in the practice and would like to be there for a couple of days, 3 days maybe, and there's enough space. So you got to really think this process through just to allow that mental state to work. Now, I think once financially, mentally, health-wise, the practice, you found the right person, then it goes down to how do we communicate this event to all the people. So the first thing that we're talking about is just communicating with our team. I personally am a firm believer that the more prepared you are, that it allows us to tell the team way in advance. It could be 3 months, 6 months, even, a year in advance. This is something that is important, not just to me, as an owner of the business, but it's important to each of you. And it's also important to the 2,000 plus patients that we have. And we need a transition plan. We need a transition plan for all of us. And that's something that we need to start solving. You've got to set it up. You've got to set them up. So you're kind of getting that buy-in. You're conditioning them to be ready that an event is going to happen, and it doesn't need to be a bad thing. It needs to be a positive thing, for us.
You're so right about that, because I think I'll talk to clients who I will say, okay, well, does your team know, right? They'll call me and they have someone and they're ready to sell and they're going to sell 100%. And I'll be like, okay, well, who in your team knows, or do they know? And they were like, well, they don't know about this person and this, but they know I'm going to sell. Like, we've been talking about this for ages. They know that transitions in my future. They know I'm ready to go hang out with the grandkids or do whatever. Those people are much less stressed and have much less anxiety about whatever conversation is going to happen about the person, right? Like, that is actually going to take over, than the people who have maybe been planning this and thinking about retiring for years, but have kept that quiet from their teams. They've never talked about it with their teams because they don't want to, upset the apple cart. They don't want anyone to leave. They don't want this to happen. Those people are much more anxious because they feel internally that they've been lying to the team in a way, and so they're trying to struggle with that. And so I think that, the win, right? I 100% agree with you that if you're however many years out, right? I have clients who have been telling their teams for 5 or 6 years, like, it's coming and it's better for you and me if we have a plan and have the right person. But when it comes down to actually having a person, right? Like, that you now know is going to be the person, you're going to have to be the judge of when the timing is. Okay. If you ask me, when do people normally do it? I'm going to tell you 80 to 90% of people wait until about the week before closing to tell their teams for sure that this is happening. Why is that?
I think they're nervous and scared that just the anxiety is kind of built up, that the team is just going to run. It's going to impact the practice. And that's the person that I get anxiety over as well. It's super anxious to be in that space. And so I just don't think that they're adequately prepared. And unfortunately, I think that's who we end up dealing with so much, is that person is just kind of coming to us and saying, I've got a problem. That's what we do. We're in the problem business, and they come to us, they dump this problem on, and this is my person. What do I do? And that's usually just something we're dealing with towards the end because their house isn't in order. They haven't thought about a million different things. So we have to go in crisis mode to kind of get them ready. And then, now we're waiting until that point. Whereas the 10% or 15% of the people that can come and just give us this blank canvas of paint me this perfect picture. I've got this person I'm talking to. What would you do over the next 1 to 2 years to guide me through this process? That's just going to go much smoother. Now, it obviously doesn't happen like that, all the time, but it's beautiful when it does. I know that you're working on one right now that, here locally that we worked with the seller and he's got his house in order. And even then that we did all the interviews with the person and she's perfect and he's perfect. And we put this whole thing together from start to finish. There's still, even in our world, so much is involved in the communication piece. You get attorneys involved and this and that, and it just starts messing up a lot of the communication that you built the foundation between the buyer and the seller, and you start talking to the team and doing all these other things, but you can still lose a little bit of that communication as you get closer to the end.
Yeah. I don't want anyone to hear this and think like that if you have a good plan and you still don't want to tell your team until as it gets closer, that's completely fine, right? I think there are hurdles in every transition, whether it be the attorneys or the banks or the landlords or, there's always one hurdle, one speed bump in a transition. And some people feel more comfortable waiting until all the dust is settled and legal docs are signed and everything is ready, especially in a 100% sale, right? Associateships, partnerships, those are different, right? Like the team knows that person, likely knows that person is going to come in, but 100% sale is different, right? And so if you wait, that's okay. I think the point to kind of summarize us here is like, if you've always been talking about it, when you then have the conversation the week before close, because you choose to wait because you think that's better for your team, it is going to be more well received than the conversation that you've never talked about it. They have no idea that you're looking to retire.
Yeah.
That is always going to be more shocking. And so if you're trying to make it easier on yourself and you're 2 or 3 years out, that's the type of stuff that you need to kind of think about. But if you're in the frying pan right now and you have someone and you're thinking about telling the team, as it gets closer, the rest of the episode, we're going to kind of try to tell you how to prepare to tell them. And you can do those things today, right? You don't have to have 2 or 3 years to prepare for that.
Yeah, I think there's the conversation and communication that's going on between the team as a giant, kind of a broad level. And then I think it goes down to how the communication goes to even down to the team members by category.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And then it goes to the patients, and it goes, another communication has to go even to the associate/buyer doctor. And then that conversation has to have, and leadership role has to go from that associate/new buyer to the individual team to the patient. Then the owner doctor's got to have the communication to individual departments and then introducing the doctor. So to me, this is like a communication opportunity that we really need. And you got to be prepared for what those conversations look like.
Oh, 100%. I think if you think about an order of who you're telling first, right? If you have any associates in your practice, you're going to have a direct conversation with that associate first. And then you and that associate doctor are going to tell the team together, because that associate, even though they're not an owner, is likely seen as a leader in the firm. That goes for any staff that is leadership. So if you have office managers or team leads or someone who maybe is seen as a leader in your office, telling them first can be really helpful, because now you have a team that is telling the team about the message. So the message is going to flow down, right? So whatever you say and feel at the top is how that should be disseminated to lower level teams, and then ultimately patients, and then ultimately referral base, et cetera, right? So you want to be really, really thoughtful about what the message is going to be, and then telling people in the right order, because you don't want to tell the team and then have a team lead feel like that they should have known first, or why didn't you give me a heads up that this was happening? So kind of the order of how you tell people, I think, is really critical. And then the message. I think the message here is something that you have to prepare for. You have to practice. We tell people to write it down first, and then to say it in the mirror, say it to your spouse, have your spouse give you questions, role play some questions that a team member might ask that are pretty harsh or maybe pretty direct, so you know exactly how to answer those. That communication is something you should practice a ton.
Okay, so summarizing, so the two leaders get together, right? Both the buyer and seller, they're getting together and coming up with a formal plan. plan, how this is going to be communicated. Then maybe senior doctor maybe communicates to that 30-year office manager person that's critical to the transition. We might do a quick night before conversation at 10 o'clock. The next meeting starts at the next day or something with the entire team. But that's done together with the associate that's there, and they're essentially announcing what this new transition is going to look like, to all the team. Do I have that accurate?
Yep.
Okay. One thing you said that just really resonated with me with being prepared. This is not something that you go unscripted on. You just don't just roll it out. It made me think about we just had from a timing standpoint, the Tom Brady roast, and it was quite entertaining. But what I found interesting was that I think from the viewer, you just watch these comedians just stand up there and just deliver this amazing delivery and comical, harsh comments to someone, and it's entertaining. But what we don't understand too is that is so much preparation. Mm-hmm. That is, they have gone and prepared. They've done small live audience just to test all of those jokes to see what is going to hit, the pauses and the delivery. And I'm not saying as a dentist that you've got to go into a professional type of being a professional speaker, but I am saying to be prepared. I am saying to have those conversations. Let's discuss this. Let's try to figure out what are the questions that our team is going to ask ahead of time. And let's have answers ready for them, or just to let them know that not to worry and write down any questions they have and just say, it will be fine.
Yeah. And I think one of the ways you can prepare is you can sit down and write out all your team members' names, and you can kind of say, hey, what matters to Sally? Okay. Sally is a single mom. I have allowed her to leave every day and pick up her kid, or I allow her to leave on half days because pre-K gets out at noon on Fridays. And I know this is going to be important to her. And you go through that and you do that with each member of your team, right? And then you have a conversation with the buyer and say, hey, here are my people. You know their compensation, you know their benefits because we've done our diligence there. Here are the non-financial, non-benefit type things that matter to each of them. This one has an aging mom. This one really loves to travel, and I always let her have 2 weeks off a year, even though that's not kind of what I normally do. Here's all the things about these people. And are you good continuing this? Like, are these practices that you're going to be okay doing? Because then when you make that announcement to the team and you get those questions from Sally or the person who has the aging mom or the person who likes to travel, you can with confidence say, you know what? Me and Dr. John have already talked about this.
Right.
He's totally on board with this. He thinks it's great, but he's going to be here tomorrow. And so you should talk to him about this too. But this is good, right? Like when we say prepare, that's what we mean. We mean going through this, not only verbally saying the things, but like going through what your team members will care about and talking to the buyer about that and saying like, do you see an issue? And that helps you, but that also helps the buyer, right? Because now they have talking points and they can use the kids' names, and they're already starting to develop the relationship with staff.
The breakfast you do on Friday, it's the annual CE that we take them to this event. It's anything that so-and-so really enjoys the 401k. She's a big saver. Whatever those details are, to be able to address that in that meeting, both from the buyer and seller, explain all that. I think there's also, from a communication standpoint, the importance of how we're delivering this message now to the public, to all of our current patients and future patients. Give me some talking tips on you dealing with this all the time, but what are those things that we need to do to prepare from a communication standpoint to our patients, from the leadership standpoint, as well as even how that team is delivering that message?
Yeah, absolutely. So you as the selling doc are going to have probably a few types of communications. You're going to send out a letter, right? And that's going to go in their mailbox or in their email box. But that is written, right? What your opportunity to talk to the patients is going to be, you're going to have the announcement, you're going to tell your team, and then that message is what's going to trickle down. So what you need to do is your office manager or your front desk, whoever's answering the phone, you need to sit down with them and you need to actually, again, do some role playing. Like, what are they going to say when a patient asks, well, why? Do you like Dr. John? Why is Dr. Frank retiring? Well, give them answers to those questions, right? Because your front line, your hygienist, those people that are daily interacting, they are really going to be the ones sharing the message of why you're leaving and why Dr. John is a good fit. So you have to be sending that message down to your team, but you also have to make sure you give your team communication and phone skills to be able to answer those questions. And so making that a priority, sitting down with them and saying, here's why Dr. John is coming on. Here's what I love about him. Here is why I'm leaving, right? If a patient asks, these are the messages that we're giving them because they're the truth. This is what I truly believe, and I know you're going to think the same thing.
Two things. The letter is so important, and that letter is a heartfelt letter. This is not I met this guy or gal and he went to this dental school and came in, he's awesome. This is, I've been praying about it. My career, my patients mean so much to me, and I've done a really deep dive. My entire team made this decision with me to find this person. This is a letter that, again, is prepared, and it's done by both parties. So, it could be from the senior doctor writing it to basically having that buying doctor review it, or the associate as well. It's the same with just bringing an associate, by the way.
Yep.
So this letter is very well thought out. So I love that part, that both parties agree to the letter. Okay.
And I will say really quick, sorry, on the letter, we love looking at those letters.
Oh, happy to. Yeah.
I think it's an important communication, and I think that letter has to have something about you kind of at the beginning and end. You can say, thanks, I've enjoyed, whatever it can be your goodbye song, but make sure it's not only your goodbye song. Make sure it is more so a spotlight on who is coming in and really highlighting them, right? We read a lot of first draft letters that are more negative skewed or more sad or,
right.
And I get it, right? Like, you've invested and you're leaving after 30 plus years, but like that really needs to take backstage. Like, you really need to be spotlighting the person who's coming in to make sure that that person is successful.
And I love how you talked about the team and preparing for those questions. Just like with the comedians, they are preparing. And so I can't emphasize enough that they're in 1 or 2 hour meeting discussing, okay, let's discuss some things that Mrs. Jones is going to have about the transition. So let's just start having some of those conversations. And Mrs. Jones could, whatever, is Dr. Charles, he is as good as Christy. Okay. Yeah. And you just have to know that there's 15 questions that are coming. Let's just discuss them.
Yep.
And then let's all be on the exact same page with, not stutters, just like, oh my God. The response is, oh my God, he or she is amazing. You are going to love her. Okay. Yeah. That's how we are presenting this case, because the patient is not leaving. Okay. Senior doctor, they're not leaving. But they just need that comfort knowing that you've done all your due diligence to make this transition, perfect. So I think that communication and that team meeting, you really need to think about it at the front desk level, from phone calls that are coming in to how that's addressed. I think from the marketing and branding standpoint to on the website, that having the picture that's now on the top versus at the bottom. So it's very well thought out from a branding standpoint, how the phone is answered to how that doctor is discussed in that conversation, either with a new patient or an existing patient, to having a picture right at the front desk. We were so excited about whatever Dr. Charles coming into the practice, and maybe having the two people together, and then having that front desk with communication that is now what to say to that patient. Oh, I didn't see that, because people don't open the mail.
Yeah.
People don't look at the website, and they just got their reminder on the appointment and they just show up. So that's the front desk. Then it's as they walk back to hygiene, that conversation, because now you could be thinking and setting up that someone now new is going to be checking their hygiene once complete. I think from the hygienist standpoint, the communication that's going to go on with the patient. Have you met Dr. Charles yet, or this? Have you seen? Oh my God, you're going to love him or her, right? So you got to think from a patient standpoint, and how are we transitioning now? From a leader standpoint, that's a leadership role that obviously some senior doctors, obviously listening to this episode, will follow. But from a buyer's perspective, if none of that has taken place, and for whatever reason you're just grabbing the keys from somebody and this takes place, this is an immediate time to step up and be the leader. Even if Dr. Jones is now left and you're the remaining doctor there and none of this took place, you've got to step it up and say, team, this is what we're going to do. Put it out there. We know there's anxiety for these patients. It's our job is to convince them that this anxiety is just a waste of their time, because I'm a leader and I will take great care of them, just like you're a leader, Susie, and let them know everything's going to be okay.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think when it comes down to it, this telling the team is just a huge exercise in communication, right? And preparing yourself for that communication. We always joke as parents, like, let's not project what we're feeling onto our children.
Right.
It's the same thing. Like, as a leader, we're not going to project our anxiety or our nervousness about this transition and us leaving onto the team, right? You care about those people. We know you do. We hear it in your voice when you talk to us. And so we want you to project success onto them, right?
sure.
Project. And by doing that, you are going to set your patients and your team up and your new buyer, who is probably very excited and also very nervous about taking over your practice. That setup is so important. And so, I think it all just boils down to communication, which is, part of life, I think.
Yeah, I think too, if you find yourself weak in this area, I mean, you can certainly reach out to communication consultants that can help and deliver that message. I know we do a lot of, I would call it just one-off, kind of coaching like that to the clients that we're working with. But I mean, I do think that this is something that if you feel this is an area of weakness, is you go out to identify that and hire maybe a company to kind of get you through.
Absolutely.
From a delivery standpoint of how all this is done.
Absolutely. All right, team, that's all we have time for today. That was only half of episode 24. So We'll make sure we re-record another to tackle the more strategic and operational points of that. But thank you for joining us on episode 106 of Transition Talk. As always, make sure to listen wherever you listen to your podcast and share the transition love with those who may not know of us yet. Until next time, friends.
Thank you.